Before we get into this episode, Mike and I want to thank you for being part of this community. We absolutely love what we do with this podcast, and we think it's important to bring you valuable content by exploring unconventional lifestyles, experiences, and perspectives. We are continually looking to improve the listening experience, and we want to bring in some of your favorite guests. We have a favor to ask, and that is if you can follow wherever you watch or listen so we can continue improving the show. We are so grateful for your support. Now let's get into it.
What's up, locals? It's Mike and Kenzie coming to you live from the 775. Today we are joined by my cousin, one of my best friends, and special guest, Josh Rushford.
Hello, Mike and Kenzie. Thank you for having me on your favorite locals podcast. My name is Josh Rushford, and I am the new guest of this episode.
Hell yeah. So we start every episode with a tradition. It's called Failing Forward. We tell a story, usually from this week that happened, and what it is you make a mistake. And then, you learn something from it and you fail forward. You get better from it. Josh, do you have one?
I do, actually. When I was on my way to Reno yesterday with my grandparents and my mom, I actually was so excited to get to Reno that I stopped by a local stranger's car, and I didn't realize at first that I was near a local stranger's car because they had the same white SUV as my grandparents did, but I forgot to know that my grandparents have a Hawaiian sticker. This guy did not have a Hawaiian sticker, and it took me about 30 seconds. I'm like, "Hey, are you my papa? Open the door. I'm trying to get to Reno." And the guy's like, "Hey, man, I'm not your papa. What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm trying to get to Reno. What's up?" And then the guy's like, "Hey, man, I think you got the wrong car." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, man." And I tried opening like the front door and then the side passenger door. And then like 30 seconds later, the light switch activated in my brain. I'm like, "Oh, I got the wrong guy." And the guy was just laughing, cracking up. And I said, "I'm sorry, man." He's like, "Don't worry about it. Have a good one." I'm like, "Thanks, you too."
Whoops. Yeah, I've made that mistake before with Ubers.
Oh
It's
my
like,
gosh.
It matches the description, but it's not the same car.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. That's a good failing forward. So how do you learn from that? How do you go forward from
You learn how to squeeze lemons into lemonade and turn your L's into W's.
Okay.
Just life experience, you make mistakes. No one's perfect.
Okay. I like that. It's true. Nobody is perfect, and I've definitely made that mistake before, too.
As long as you don't repeat the same incident over again, you've learned from the mistake, and you keep implementing what you've learned forward, moving on, and acting upon it.
I feel like that dude might have thought you were on drugs at first. Like, what the hell is this guy doing?
I think at first he thought I was either a burglar or on drugs, and I never take drugs.
Mhm.
I don't do drugs or alcohol. I'm a very
Like a sworn testimony.
I'm a very positive, chill guy. I just made the wrong case of mistaken identity, and, it could happen to anyone.
Definitely. It's happened to me. Kenzie, what's your failing forward?
My failing forward is my fetish for World Market. I love going in there when I don't need anything. It's like my target because I go in there. I absolutely don't need anything there all the time, but I go in there and then I walk out with like a million things that are so expensive. So last year when we were putting together our patio, I got the most expensive cushions for our couch, our patio couch. And 2 months later, it started snowing and it completely ruined our expensive couch pillows.
Mm-hmm.
And now this spring, they're dirty, they're moldy, and I'm like...
They're not moldy, but they're definitely dusty and they have shit all over them.
Well, they're not what they were. They're not like the cute, fun, trendy, boho pillows that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think it's like, let's cut costs where we can and not go to World Market all the time to buy expensive shit that's just going to get ruined in a season. Or put your freaking pillows away in storage.
Don't buy expensive pillows. Get them at Walmart. Put the nice ones in storage. Bring them out when it's clean.
Yep.
My failing forward was not doing my job on this podcast and finding a promo clip when we were putting something together. I had most of the week to do it, and I put it on the back burner until like literally the 11th hour. Midnight is coming, and we had to scrap a promo clip because I did not come with what I was supposed to. So, oops. Let's get to the entire reason why we're here to discuss autism. So Josh, you live a very regimented lifestyle. You mentioned you have like a specific day where you blow off steam. You mentioned hyperfixations earlier. Kenzie touched a little bit on being hyperfixated on like the outcome of the podcast. you have hyperfixations. You talked about Legos a little bit, right?
Right.
So you have autism. Can you describe what autism is in your own words?
In my own words, having autism is like you want to do 10 things in a day. You're trying to conduct an orchestra, but you can only do maybe 3 or 4 things in a day realistically.
Mhm.
You feel like your attention span is bombarded in an information digital age economy. A lot of people are vying for your attention. Do I do the job application? Do I go see my friends? Do I go get my work done at home and chill out? Or do I go work out after the gym to like just de stress from a busy day at work? Do I go buy food to eat or do I go get food and make a meal for the week so I can like feed myself?
Mhm. So it sounds like what you're describing is 10 different things going on at once, trying to organize that in your head and kind of plot everything out so
Right.
that it flows smoothly.
Trying to make sure things flow smoothly, plot out my day, accomplish what I want to get done. If I don't accomplish something, it's like there's always tomorrow. If the sun rises tomorrow, I can accomplish it the next day.
There you go. Um, with autism, how would you describe it to somebody who doesn't know what it is or is unfamiliar with autism?
To someone who doesn't know what autism is, people with autism, we have our just like our creatures of habit behaviors that like we have to do, like we have to give ourselves break time,
Mhm.
like time like where we have to recharge our emotional social batteries, because when we're around people a lot sometimes we get a little anxious. We may deal with socially awkward situations.
Mhm.
We may step in a room, we may step out of a room. On our good day we put our best selves forward, on our worst day we put our 2 steps back. Like it's you're trying to put your best foot forward and just have a positive outcome of the day. And sometimes when you have like a difficult conversation or a bad day, you just gotta like say, hey, that today was not a good day, but I'm gonna learn from it.
When you talk about socially awkward situations, right?
hmm
Can you give me an example of what something like that is in your normal day-to-day life? Like what's
My,
a weird
my
social
my
situation
normal
for you?
day to day life, some people will like ask me a question and I may not know the answer to that question. Like for example, I work with this student who has special needs and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm saying, "Hell, I'm just making sure you're safe, doing my job." And they're like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "Well, I'm here to make sure you learn and you're excited and passionate about school." And sometimes a student will bring up like a video game or like a show that like you may not care about, but you have to like act interested
Mhm.
to just be their friend. I'm like, yeah, that's a really great show. Or, oh, I've never thought of it that way before. That's really cool.
Mhm.
Like, you have to sometimes put your emotions in check and your behavior in check to accommodate them.
That is nail on the head awkward
And
situations.
you don't want to hurt people's feelings. Like, sometimes you have to tiptoe around people, even though you feel like you're walking on eggshells. It's like you just don't want to hurt someone's self esteem.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to, what I've learned with autism is you have to swallow your pride and not let your ego get the better of you.
Mm. I notice, and maybe you're more adept to picking this up, but there are things that you are really, really into, and then somebody might not care at all. The situation you just described about a student who has autism was telling you something you don't give a shit about,
Yes.
and you have to put on this I care face. I have those interactions all the time with strangers, and it's uncomfortable. It's a little weird, but that's part of socializing, and it gets a little goofy.
When I worked in the service industry at Brennan Theaters and Chick-fil-A and Sam's Club, I learned I had to put on this mask, or like I felt like I was an actor on a stage performing and I had to give the paying customer a good show and play the character role of the salesperson, the cashier. Hi, how are you today? Good to see you. Thank you for coming. This is our special. Would you like to buy our product or the merchandise we're selling? He's like, oh, that's okay. Thank you. Or they say, oh, what do you recommend? I'm like, I recommend the Superstar combo. It comes with a drink, popcorn, 13.50. Oh, have you tried the spicy chicken sandwich? It's delicious. It's my pleasure to serve you today at Chick-fil-A. Stuff like that, for example, where you have to follow a script. You have to play the part, to look your best because you're representing the company and you're representing the brand. If you're not passionate about a brand or a company, well, number one, the company will not want to hire you again. And number two, you're like, what are we doing here? I don't feel like we're selling a good product that people care about. We're just here to collect a paycheck.
Yeah, and that won't last.
And that company and that brand will not last very long if people aren't passionate and they're not selling it to the consumer.
I agree with that. Let me ask you, what do you wish more people knew about autism?
What I wish people knew about autism was that it's not a mental disability, it's a spectrum. People can either be on the lower end of autism or they can be on the higher end of autism.
Mhm.
Just because someone has a disability doesn't mean we should villainize or monsterify them. We should, be accepting and accommodating of them. Even if we may not understand where they're coming from, we should be more inclusive and accepting of people with differences in our society. If we want to put down a homeless person or a person in a wheelchair, wouldn't we want to try to make their lives a little easier? Like say, hey, good job. You came in today. Thank you for all you do. Like, I know I feel good when I help people who are less fortunate.
Hmm.
I know anyone can like be one paycheck away from homelessness or falling down on hard times. I try to be just a good person and help people out. And I'm not going to judge somebody because they're a fan of something that I'm not into. I'm just going to ask them questions like, well, what made you want to watch that show or listen to that music? Like, what gives you fulfillment and satisfaction from doing that experience?
Hmm. I think it's very common that people will accidentally be patronizing towards people with disabilities or the homeless or anybody who's considered like a protected class.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think you're being kind towards somebody, but in reality it's like, no, I'm an adult. I take care of myself. Like treat me with some dignity and respect.
Just treat someone with dignity and respect. We're not asking to be treated like we're 5 years old
Hmm.
or like we have like a protected class and we're on the endangered species list.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to kind of interrupt that because I don't want to compare homelessness to autism. Like I don't think that's what we're doing. But just hearing you guys talk about homelessness,
Hmm.
it seems like you guys are comparing it a little bit to autism. So I
Okay.
think like
I can clarify that.
yeah, let's clarify that for
Yeah.
the
So
listeners.
being patronizing towards somebody with a mental disability or somebody who's homeless, like patronizing a homeless person, like, hey, you know what, buddy? How are you, man? Like, you're down on your luck. It's not necessarily being nice. It's like being fake nice because you feel bad for the person.
Mhm.
You're like, hey, buddy, you have no friends. Cheer up. You'll meet someone someday that'll care about you and look out for you.
Yeah.
Or you're like, hey, you want to meet up at this time, and then the person never shows up when you wanted to meet at that time. You feel like a sense of, wow, I was trying to be accommodating to that person's schedule, and they didn't take time out to meet me. That hurt.
Hmm. Feels rude. Feels
It
disrespectful.
feels rude, disrespectful, and inconsiderate of your time, right?
And that's the same thing with patronizing. Like,
Yeah.
And another common misconception is when they say that people with autism are weird or socially awkward. Yeah, we're different. We have different interests, but we're probably no more different than the anime community you see or the LGBTQ people at Pride Month. Like we exist, we are autistic, but we're here.
mhm.
It's like just get used to it. We're here. Like we're here to have a good time, have fun. We're just trying to make sense of a crazy chaotic world like anyone else.
Let me ask, do you think, is it rude to describe somebody as autistic versus like person first language? Like somebody with autism or that person is autistic? Is it rude to call someone autistic?
I think some people might prefer the term Asperger's syndrome or some use the word autistic. It depends on the person.
Hmm.
My experience, I don't think it's rude, but I know some people probably prefer, oh, they have special needs or they like maybe they have Asperger's. Like different people prefer different terms that make them comfortable or suitable to their liking, but I don't think it's rude, no.
Okay.
What are some challenges that you have faced with autism that you have been able to overcome?
The common challenges a person with autism faces is trying to find services and like a therapist for like when you have mental health issues, you're trying to articulate what you're saying, trying to find a meaningful social connection. I've been able to do that. Stepping outside your comfort zone is a big one because sometimes when you feel down, the last thing you want to do is just put yourself on the spot and say, "Hi, can I be your friend?" Like it takes a lot of guts to approach someone you've never met before.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I'm trying to apply for a job in general. Like sometimes you show up for an interview, you do the online application. Hey, do I have the right place? Am I talking to the right person, the right manager? Am I talking to a person or a computer here or a bot?
Hmm. That's legitimate. Yeah, that's a good thing. Being able to discern, right? Are you talking
Having
with the
discernment.
person you're supposed to?
And another challenge I've learned is if you make a mistake in conversation, just say, "Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry." It's like, "Oh, I've never thought of it that way before." Like, I'll be more considerate next time. Because sometimes when you hear people talk, and I may think something the person is saying is funny, but that person may take offense to that. They were probably trying to be serious and they weren't kidding. Or we may make a mistake because we don't always get social cues or inferences.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, this is the time to be serious. This is the time to be funny. This is the time I have to put my poker face on or just go with the flow and bite the bullet.
Hmm.
This is the time I just need to deal with it and get through the day.
With misinterpreting social cues. It does feel like we have this unwritten rule book of what is and is not okay socially. And I feel like people with autism, it's an odd, it's at odds, I guess is the way to put it, because there is no set rules of like this is how you engage with somebody socially.
Right.
But then there are things where it's like if you miss a social cue, like suddenly that's an uncomfortable situation, right?
It's like, say, for example, you're going on your first date. You don't want it to be a blind date. You want to get to know the person, they want to get to know you.
Hmm.
You want to have the best impression when they come meet your family and you meet their family. You just want to like just put your best foot forward and say, "Hi, my name is Josh. This is who I am. Can we work something out here? If the date goes well, great. We go on to round two. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. You know, I'll be a little sad, but I'll take the rejection." It's like that's life.
Yeah.
Plenty
Well,
of fish in the sea. And as Frank Sinatra said, that's life.
I think, yeah, first dates in general too can also be a little awkward.
oh yeah.
Um, but I think from what I'm hearing, it seems like if things are more black and white, if they're just a little bit more clear, then it's obviously easier to understand what the social cues are, but it's probably a little bit more difficult to kind of live in that gray area of the unknown,
Right.
which is, I mean, I think in general, people like to have very black and white situations happen because they know where people stand. I think, that would be the ideal situation, but that's also not life. There is a lot of gray area because people are also running by their own rules, their own social rules, where they either don't care at all what you think or how you say it, or people are maybe a little bit more sensitive. And so it's like, how do you navigate that in the world when it's evolved and it's changed, especially like with the internet and
Hmm.
social media?
Either you evolve and change with the times, or you just end up like a dinosaur in a museum. You either go extinct, or you learn to go to the new well that has water. Like, you will learn to like have patience and persistence and grit and determination depending on the social situation or circumstance.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about like pulling yourself up by the bootstraps here. I'm talking about you just go with the flow and you find what works and what doesn't work.
So what have you been able to overcome then?
I've been able to overcome challenges by just not being so hard on myself, being more accepting and more forgiving of my feelings,
Hmm.
learning that it's okay to process emotions, it's okay to have uncertainty and doubt and fear, but overcoming that fear, stepping outside of my comfort zone with doing new things, doing new people, trying new experiences. And sometimes, like driving on the freeway can be scary. You may be afraid of unsafe drivers and people that have DUIs, but you have to go on the freeway to get to your destination. Or if you don't want to drive on the freeway, you can always take Amtrak or you can take BART to get to the Bay Area.
Hmm. There's a really big obstacle that you overcame that you're not mentioning. I'll mention it.
Sure.
Uh, you did not speak for a lot of your very young life, and then something switched. Do you remember that?
When I was about 0 to 3 years old, I did not talk. But one time, my mom took me to Disneyland, and I started talking about all the characters, and it just something clicked in me where I wanted to talk about Winnie the Pooh, and I wanted to talk about Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, the shows I'd grown up on,
Hmm.
watching Beauty and the Beast, Lady and the Tramp,
Yeah, but
and
you
Peter
you like
Pan. Like I just got outside of my shell.
yeah. So you went from spent basically 3 years of your formative life not speaking, and then all of a sudden some switch hit, and now you won't shut up. I love it.
Now my mom says now you never shut up and you have no filter, and I've had to learn to have a filter because I have to say the appropriate things in certain situations. And my friend Aiden is like, "Hey Josh, read the room."
Do you feel like you have a hard time reading the room?
Sometimes I feel I may have a hard time reading the room if I don't know my audience, but I think I've gotten better about that over the years. Like just trying to be like more aware of my surroundings and my environment, and just being cognizant of how people feel, and just like not it's not like being politically correct or being politically incorrect. It's just about being like accepting of people's differences and their situations and not being quick to rush to judgments,
Hmm.
or what's the word I'm looking here for? Not being rushing to judgments or assumptions that are not true based on what you think happens when something totally different happens.
Hmm. That's pretty easy to do. I think everybody does that too. It is hard to read the room for me sometimes. I make that mistake frequently.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
do.
I Yeah.
You like to push the boundaries a little bit. I don't know if it's not reading the room. I think it's not caring enough to read the room and pushing the limit.
Well, it's taking the temperature of the room and going, it's a little hot. Let's make it hotter.
I've done that too sometimes where I'm like, well, if I couldn't do something this way, could I do it the B through Z, XYZ way? Where I will try to like find certain loopholes or caveats to like, can I get this done, but in like a different way?
hmm we touched a little bit about politically incorrect versus incorrect. I think this is something that I'm seeing on social media a lot on TikTok and Instagram Reels. Self-diagnosis of autism. People that seem to be able, they don't really fit like the parameter of what I consider like autism characteristics or symptoms, like a lack of, reading social cues, inability to read the room, awkward social interaction, lack of eye contact, things like that. They seem to pick up on all of that and be very well versed with like internet culture and how to communicate
Hmm.
properly. So I feel like I see some people that are faking autism diagnoses online.
100% they're faking the autism diagnoses because they want attention.
hmm
So do
And
you see that? Are you seeing that as
I
well?
have seen that on TikTok and certain YouTube videos where like people say I have autism. I think like a licensed clinician or psychologist could tell if someone had like autism or ADHD or a different neurological or identity disorder,
Some kind of deviation from
some
that.
kind of deviation from the norm. Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
just think it's people wanting to be loud, wanting attention. They don't feel like they're being heard. So they're like, hey, if I fake having this disability, people will listen to me.
well, that's the irony of it is that I feel like most people who have autism aren't out in public parading it around like, look at me, I have autism. It's more like, look at me, I'm a normal person. Don't let my autism get in the way of us being friends or
Don't let
having an interaction.
don't let my autism get in the way of us being friends, having an interaction, or just trying to have a normal relationship here. We're not trying to make it a show of love on the spectrum.
Yeah, like don't treat me differently is
Don't
basically.
treat me differently or like a second class citizen. Just treat me as a normal person.
How do you feel about the show Love on the Spectrum?
I think it's an interesting show and a premise. I think it brings more visibility to real life people who have autism. I think that there are people that just struggle in their daily life having a relationship. I mean, I've never really dated before, but I know when I'm going to go on the first date, I'll feel a little socially awkward too and a little uncomfortable. But I'll have to put myself in that position and grow and expand when I talk to a future person I'm attracted to.
hmm Future person. I know you're into chicks. It's okay. You can say women.
Future female lady I talk to, and I think I just want
Whatever my person
I just
is.
want a person, find a person with like-minded interests, that'll enjoy my company and want to spend time with me, and then we can have engaging intellectual conversations like a podcast or like a book, and like get to know each other more.
hmm
Walk in, go to trips, walk on the sunsets, go to the beach, have fun.
So if you were to have like a Hinge profile, what would your bio be?
My guy would be chill, laid back dude that enjoys Legos, books, reading, and walking on the beach and going hiking,
Okay.
and enjoys movies and music.
I think that's definitely something to mention.
An accurate description.
You are a huge movie consumer, absolute movie buff.
I'm an absolute movie buff. I'm a big Lego buff. I like Chick-fil-A. I like In-N-Out Burger.
You do have, so this is a common characteristic with people with autism is hyperfixations, right?
Yes.
And what are your current fixations and why?
My current fixations is I really like Legos because when I was a kid, I remember being excited when the Bionicle set came out.
hmm
Now I said, hey, I can collect these sets. They remind me of my childhood, my youthful nostalgia. I like building things, taking things apart. I like collecting the minifigures. I know they'll be worth something someday if I hold on to them. And I see people on YouTube and like different Instagram channels, they have their collections. I'm like, now I want to build up my collection.
So it's a very niche thing that you're seeing other people engage into.
It's a niche thing I'm seeing other people engage into as a hobby and as a passion, correct?
Okay.
I don't like compare myself to other people, but I've like learned through like the YouTube community of Lego people, half asleep Chris, TD Bricks, who by the way I watch like every one of his videos he does. I watch him like I vicariously live through his videos,
hmm
and Danny Bob Studios and like Spit Bricks and all these other content creators. I enjoy their stuff, and they've taught me a lot about Lego that I really didn't know myself.
Well, I've seen a lot of people that are legitimate, like artists with Legos. They make crazy setups, crazy structures. Somebody's done like a block of New York City where you can open little doors and it's actually like an actual cafe
That's
inside.
awesome.
It's very creative. It's impressive. Is that something that interests you, or do you like the actual collection aspect of it?
I like more so the collecting aspect of it and like building simple structures.
Hmm.
Someday I want to build a Lego city, but right now I just don't have the funds for it because Lego's expensive. Of like, depends on what you buy. I had one friend tell me that he bought the Avengers Tower, and I'm like, yeah, I just don't have $700 to buy an Avengers Tower, despite the set looking really cool.
$700?
I
That's
think
how much
that's
that costs?
not worth spending that kind of money on.
No.
That's insane. Can you buy knockoff Legos?
Oh, you can definitely buy knockoff Legos. I was in a convention. I went to this it's called VacaCon. I went to this Vacaville convention. There was this guy who was from Antelope, California, and he had these custom minifigure Legos he was selling. He was selling custom minifigures of Star Wars, Sonic characters, Naruto, One Punch Man, Demon Slayer. Maybe he had Godzilla and he had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was awesome. So I bought a couple custom minifigures. I got an Amy Rose minifigure, a Chewbacca minifigure, a Clone Trooper minifigure because he had the minigun. I'm like, the minigun Gatling gun, that's cool. Like a minigun blaster because I grew up watching Clone Wars and that was like one of my all-time favorite shows of Star Wars. I grew up watching a lot of TV shows, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. I'm from a generation that like truly appreciated cartoons and like the Hanna-Barbera, the Looney Tunes animation style,
Hmm.
and the 90s and 2000s were like a peak time for creativity in cartoons in general.
I agree with that. I feel like it's kind of slid off this slippery slope. And now it sucks.
We've lost the creative edge. Like I miss the old SpongeBob episodes when it was funny. I miss the Johnny Bravo. I miss Dexter's Laboratory. I miss Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy with its meta commentary humor. And like these shows will always like stand the test of time. They're way ahead of time. Now it's all cookie cutter. Like
Everything's 3D animation. There's no hard lines or hard edges. Nothing's 2D.
nothing's
I don't like
2D
that.
anymore.
Yeah.
And Cartoon Network now just kind of consists of Teen Titans Go and like a few other shows, and that's it.
Hmm.
The last show I really cartoons I enjoyed that I connected with were Regular Show and Adventure Time because at least they had themes of growing up, maturity, betrayal, love, and going on adventures and like
It was dimensional.
it was dimensional. You could relate to the character, you could relate to the life lessons the cartoon show and the episodes were teaching you. Exactly.
Do you feel like you relate to things like cartoons or seeing those like dimensional characters because it's more spelled out for you? And it doesn't have the
Absolutely.
same subtleties
It's
that like
more spelled
interaction does.
out and it's not like the subtleties you're having in a conversation.
Mhm.
Like I definitely relate to like media on YouTube and podcasts because you feel like you're part of the conversation and you feel like you can vibe with those people
Mhm.
and you feel a connection to those characters or to those content creators.
Because I've noticed this. I feel like the community with autism and the community with anime are locking hands.
We are locking hands together because we feel a connection. We feel a vibe.
Hmm.
What is the vibe? I need to know
The
this.
vibe is
Bring me in.
Bring me in.
The vibe of the anime and autistic community is we feel we can have a good time. We can have a sense of camaraderie and humor. Like we don't feel people will judge us for like our tastes if we want to watch certain shows like Naruto, My Hero Academia, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I recently with Aiden started watching this show called Delicious in Dungeon. We think it's pretty funny. It's about these four characters, Marciel and Elf. It's about Chilchuck. He's this guy that unpacks locks. It's about Leos. He's like this knight in shining armor who exhibits some characteristics of autistic traits. And he's like very socially awkward in conversations.
Hmm.
And there's this other person named Shinji who's like the cook that makes all the food. He's very funny.
I feel like, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like with the anime and just like cartoons in general, what I've noticed is that the characters are very what is the word I'm trying to say?
It's like overtly expressive.
Yes,
is what I'm
exactly.
thinking.
Yeah. So I feel like the cartoons are extravagant. They have very is boisterous
Mhm.
with a B.
Boisterous makes sense. Yeah.
Boisterous.
Boisterous with a B. Sorry. Okay. I feel like they're very boisterous personalities. And so I feel like maybe for someone who is like really into reading social cues, it's very easy to understand, oh, this person is happy or excited, or this is a villain, or this is a good guy.
Hmm.
Like you can clearly see who the characters are and where they stand. So
There's no
do
question about it.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
there's no question about who the personality or what the personality of the
Right.
character is. So do you feel like that there's a connection there for people with
I
autism?
definitely feel there's a connection there with people for autism because they can genuinely see which character is the protagonist or the antagonist. Whereas real world, it's not black and white. You don't know who's a good person, who's a bad person, and internal, external motivations. And people change. Good people can become bad. Bad people can become good.
And some people, there are good people who do bad things, and vice versa. There are bad people who do good things.
There are good people who do bad things and bad people who do good things, like you said. And like reality is just more complicated.
Hmm. It's very dimensional that way. So that's the connection that I was seeing. I think that being able to read the expressions of a character is not only more digestible, but it doesn't leave any question for the storyline. You can enjoy the storyline without going, okay, is this person good or bad?
We
You know.
had the conversation earlier in the car today when we went to go get some burrito food and breakfast food and allergy medicine about the mafia. A lot of people think the mafia are bad people, but the one bright spot they had on their resume was when they created the casinos of Las Vegas.
Hmm. Vegas would not exist without the mob.
Las
We were
Vegas would
talking about
not
that.
Las Vegas would not exist without the mafia. And also during World War II, the Italian mafia was instrumental in helping to overthrow Benito Mussolini.
Really? I didn't know that.
And the Sicilian the Allies aligned themselves with the Sicilian mafia to fight the fascists.
So we're getting off topic, but I'm going to loop it back into what we were just talking about. So hyperfixations, you have Legos, you've had other fixations in the past. What were those and why'd you move on?
Okay, so in the past, when I was 5 years old, I had a fixation on space travel. I wanted to be a NASA astronaut. I would watch shows by Bill Nye the Science Guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I was just consumed by the ideas of galaxies, universes, aliens, stars, and the cosmos.
Hmm.
And I wanted to know everything I could about space, so I would go with my grandparents or my mom to the Chabot Space Planetarium. And what eventually turned me off with space when I realized that I would have to know a lot about aerospace engineering and I'd have to know advanced mathematics and trigonometry, calculus, and physics because they want people that know what they're doing and they operate the space shuttle
Hmm.
and how to fix broken equipment.
Yeah.
Because in space, there is no Ace Hardware. There is no Walmart when you can get something that's broken. You need to know how to operate expensive taxpayer funded government equipment.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's not a second team you can call to come give you backup.
There's not a second tow truck or like space module you can call to get you backup. Like you mess up, you're screwed.
So is the math component what turned you off to it, or was it the fact that it's like, oh, this isn't something that I can just plug into? Like that's going to consume your entire life.
Both.
Right?
It was something that like I can't just plug in, plug out. This would consume my entire life, and also the mathematical component of it. I've never been really strong in math. I mean, I had to repeat statistics 3 times before I finally passed it.
Hmm.
I did good in geometry, algebra 1, algebra 2, but like I'm just going to do math if it applies to my daily life, you know?
Yeah. When it gets theoretical, that's where it gets harder to grasp.
It gets hard to grasp when it's theoretical in these logical equations, exactly. But I don't need to understand, these high equations to appreciate a genius like Elon Musk or Albert Einstein. Like there are people who are savants that are like really talented and have these gifts on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
And then you have lower people at on the autism spectrum that are like less socially developed. Doesn't mean they're bad people. They
Hmm.
just have a little more harder time getting along and interacting with humanity in their daily life.
Yeah. And that's okay. I think
That's
that
absolutely okay.
just like everybody else, there is a spectrum of, prolific like titans of industry, right? You've got the Elon Musks. He happens to double dip. So he's somewhere on this kind of spectrum with Asperger's autism. And he's also hyper successful in society. And he's, Tesla, SpaceX, trying to get people to Mars. Very busy guy, has a lot of fixations going on. It seems like he's really, really good at making companies big and getting them to the next stage, whatever that is.
Yes.
I think that there are other people in life who, struggle with daily tasks too. Whether autism or no autism, it's there's just winners across the board and there are people who struggle and don't do well. And it's not necessarily an autism thing. But it seems like the people at the top, there are a lot of people who have similar characteristics with autism. Like I'm trying to think, I don't remember her name, but she completely like redid the industry of how cattle are moved, and now it's hyper efficient for cultivating like mass farmed
I
cattle.
think you're
Mhm.
talking about Temple Grandin or something like that.
You are correct. That's her
Temple
name.
Grandin.
Hmm.
She saw how the industry was trying to herd cattle to be processed into meat.
Hmm.
And she said, no, there has to be a more humanistic, naturalistic approach to this. We need to understand the emotions of cattle before we herd them for grazing and pasteurization and meat processing purposes.
Hmm.
And she like completely changed industries and is like very intelligent, knows a lot about animals.
Hmm.
And there's this other woman named Jane Goodall who knows a lot about monkeys and a lot about chimpanzees,
Hmm. And those are hyperfixations.
and those are hyperfixations. Jane Goodall just cannot stop talking about chimpanzees, and sure, the Temple Grandin can just not stop talking about cattle.
So I think with where we're at in society with like gene editing and our understanding of human neurochemistry in the brain, things like autism might be curable in the future. And if it were, we would lose people. If you found out that your young child had autism and it was curable, you wouldn't get the Temple Grandins, you wouldn't get the Elon Musks, we wouldn't get you.
Right. I
If
think
Go ahead, sorry.
gene editing the sequence of autism. If we got rid of some highly intelligent people who have autism and we have gifts, we would lose people in the arts and music
Yeah.
and engineering and science, and I think it would set us back decades.
Hmm.
I think it's like reframing how we look at autism too. Like, what is a stigma of autism that you wish did not exist?
The social stigma of like autism I wish did not exist is like we're just a bunch of quirky nerds and geeks that all we do in our free time is we just want to watch Marvel movies and look at popular culture, or we're just brainiacs that don't want to have a conversation. And like we do want conversation, just we have different interests. Like maybe someone likes anime, maybe someone out there likes Star Wars.
Hmm.
We just struggle to meet normal people sometimes to where they're at or what they're into. Like some people are into sports. My dad is into football. I can watch maybe half of a football game before I get bored and I go to my room to do some Legos or work on the computer or whatever else I'm doing. It doesn't mean I don't like sports. It's just that I'm not a diehard sports fan like my dad is.
Yeah. And then I do want to touch back on another one of your fixations, books. You read more than anybody I know. How many books do you go through in a week?
I want to say I can easily go through 5 or 8 books in a week.
And are you reading them all simultaneously?
I read them simultaneously. I read certain chapters at a time. Right now, I'm currently reading a book about the Allied occupation of World War II called Trial at Tokyo, where Japanese war criminals were tried and found guilty or not guilty based on what they did in committing war crimes.
Hmm. And do you feel like you can retain all that information when you're going through so much information in one week?
I feel like I can retain half the information. The other half of the information is just kind of like generalizing it and summarizing it.
Hmm.
I don't remember all the names, but I try to get to like the main topics and main ideas. I feel like I can read copious amounts of information in a week.
Hmm. It's just something I find very impressive that I'm not able to do. I can't crush through one book in a week, let alone multiple, and read them at the same time and keep track of all of those along the same
And the
timeline.
way I keep track is I get a highlighter and I just start highlighting. That's my secret. It's a Josh book when he highlights it.
I feel like you're also really good at like relaying the information back when you talk to people. So, like, after you read something or after you learn, you're really good about explaining that and making somebody able to understand what you just read in a cohesive way, which is something that I actually struggle with, and it's something that I'm practicing. So when I do read something or listen to something, I try to repeat it back very quickly to you or someone that I know,
Hmm.
so that in the future I'll be able to remember it and be able to bring it up in conversation again. But you do a really good job at it. Like,
Yeah,
I
you
think
just
that
summarized trying Japanese war criminals, whether they were guilty or not, and what they did very quickly. And you've brought multiple books with you.
is that like reading comprehension then? Like, what would that? Yeah, I feel like I just that's something that I wish I had.
I just feel like a scholar when I read, or like an academic historian, and that's just like my passion. And I get into a book, and I just don't want to stop reading. I keep going,
Hmm.
and I'm really into video games. I've met some friends, Robert, Daniel, Aiden, and I, and Declan and Lupe. We like video games. I like playing Pac-Man. I like playing Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This drum rhythm game called Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Festival. It's just a drum game where you're trying to hit the beats on a guitar. It kind of reminds me of like a Japanese version of Guitar Hero.
Mm.
And just like I am big into video games. Like after a day of work, I like to play video games and have fun.
How do you unwind?
Playing video games, working out, going for walks, reading, listening to music,
Hmm.
talking and having social interactions with people, visiting my grandparents, asking how people are doing.
Nice.
When we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that when you watch comedy or when you are hearing somebody tell a joke, that it's hard to discern whether they're being serious or if it's like just dark comedy,
Hmm.
depending on what the joke is. So I want to know, like, what comics do you like? Like, what do you find funny?
Some of the comics I find really funny. I find Adam Sandler funny. Joe Rogan's really funny. Dave Chappelle is funny. Cat Williams I think is hilarious. Ricky Gervais is really funny. Trey Parker and Matt Stone I find hilarious because they make an animated show of talking puppets of like the South Park kids, Eric Cartman, Butters, Stan, and all these characters at South Park Elementary that get into hijinks.
Hmm.
I find Ed and Eddie funny because that's a show you grew up on and could relate to. Eddie's trying to make money with a doing schemes, jawbreakers. Ed is into monster movies,
Let me
and Double
ask a.
D
I have a
is really
couple.
academic and into science.
I have a couple follow-up questions about comedy with that. Um, when comedians make fun of autism, is that offensive to you, or is it something that's on the table?
I don't find it offensive. Like a Quentin Tarantino movie, I find it all on the table. I like it when people push boundaries because if you don't push boundaries or step outside of your comfort zone, and if society's too sensitive, then we don't grow and we don't push forward if we don't pioneer.
Hmm. So that doesn't cross a personal line because you feel like it's. I guess where I'm coming from, why I ask that is I see some comedians who have really surface level takes on autism, or maybe they call themselves autistic because they had a weird interaction with a barista. I don't get offended by it, but it feels lazy. It feels like a cheap cop out versus there's like really witty takes on autism where it's like, yeah, I don't totally understand like everything about history, but I was really into trains, so that's why I'm attracted to World War II. Like that's a
Yes.
dark joke that's hinting at autism, but it's
And
creative.
getting to your point of what fixations I was interested in as a kid, when I was 5 years old, I used to line up rows of Brio trains and Hot Wheels. That's how I had fun. I would
Hmm.
love to build trains and tracks, and my grandparents would take me to the train museum in Sacramento at the time. I thought it was the coolest thing as a kid because I was watching Thomas the Tank Engine. I wanted to know how trains worked. I
Hmm.
was really into trains at a young age. And then I was into World War II at 8 years old. I wanted to know who the Allies were and who the Axis were. And I'm still interested in learning about wars and people like Alexander the Great, Pompey, Charles de Gaulle, FDR, was Churchill, et cetera, et cetera.
Going back to the comedy question, I think the joke needs to be very creative and witty in order for me to appreciate it, respect it, and find it not offensive. I think if you're just doing quick jabs, like that's where it gets. And this is with not just autism, but this is even with race. I think in general, like there needs to be creativeness and wittiness behind it where it's like, oh yeah, you got me, but not just like a surface level jab.
Hmm.
Like that's why people I think can get offended.
Hmm.
But it's like if you can make a person who maybe identifies in that group or is part of that group and you have them be like, "Oh, you got me." Like that's so true. That's where it's not offensive. It just gets offensive if it just comes off like it's being mean
Mean.
and cruel.
That's punching
I
down.
think if you're punching up and you just want to have a conversation with autistic people and you're not making a joke at their expense, I think you should absolutely can tell jokes about autism.
Hmm.
But if you're punching down and being mean and you're making jokes, say about like a group of people, like, oh, I'm just going to be mean to like either the Ukrainians or the Russians, then that's wrong.
So I think that there's a level people talk about punching up and punching down. Punching up is where maybe you're part of an oppressed class or a protected group and everything's on the table. Straight white men are the easiest thing to punch up on. Punching down is usually on a protected class. It's something where it's like not fair, right? Or it's like, oh, you shouldn't pick on trans people. You shouldn't pick on the LGBTQ. You
You
shouldn't pick
shouldn't
on
pick on black people. You shouldn't pick
right.
on Asian
So
people.
that has been considered punching down. I don't agree with that philosophy if you're making smart jokes. If you're making the cheap, shitty jabs and it's just mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually not very good and it's in poor taste. Everybody there is kind of like, If you have a really creative point that you're making, I don't necessarily think that that's bad. I think it's showing respect to whatever group that you're talking about because you think that they're human enough, adult enough, and competent enough to deal with the meanness back and forth. You treat them like an equal in that scenario.
As long as you treat people with respect and homage and paying it forward, I think you'll be okay and the joke is fine.
Hmm.
I'm not really offended about autistic jokes. I think some of them are really funny and they make me reflect on myself as a person and as where is the country and where is the culture headed.
Hmm. Yeah, that's where my mind was at with that. I have 2 questions left. You down for that?
Yeah, I'm down.
Okay.
Hit them at me, bro. Let's go.
What advice do you have for people that want to be a better friend, a better coworker, or a better parent to somebody with autism?
The advice I have for people that want to be a better friend, a better parent, or better coworker to people who are with autism, number one, know where people are coming from. Number two, remember everyone has their good days and bad days and dog days. They're going to go through the good, bad, and ugly. Number three, let people go through their emotions as long as they're not hurting anyone or harming themselves. Let people, live vicariously through others and just be a buddy, be a supporting friend, and don't be an asshole and don't be a jerk and don't punch people down and don't kick them when they're at their lowest. Everyone wishes they had that friend or their buddy that was helping them through a tough time or at their worst moments.
Hmm.
You don't know if someone has lost a loved one, lost a pet cat or a pet dog, or lost a job. Like those can be very traumatic experiences for anyone, regardless if someone has autism or not autism.
Hmm. So treating people with respect was a big one.
Respect and dignity.
That's the highest level, I think.
You don't have to treat people like royalty. You don't have to make them treat them like they're high class, but treat them just with basic respect and dignity like you want anyone else. When you go to a restaurant and you think the service is good, you tip someone. If you see a homeless person in the street, you give them $5 because you feel bad for him and you want to be nice and help him out.
And maybe he can enjoy a cold beer.
Maybe he can enjoy a cold beer, a nice haircut. Exactly.
Well, then, my last question for you, what do you think are some helpful resources for people with autism or loved ones with autism?
I think helpful resources for people with autism are definitely talking to a school counselor, definitely talking to a doctor, definitely talking to organizations that go out and support people with special needs in the community,
Hmm.
definitely friends that want to get people to interact. It could be a Bible group, it could be a study group, it could be a group on college that's raising awareness for autism. Any group that's trying to make people an ally and not an adversary or an enemy. I think that's how we can get people with special needs and autism to move forward in society.
So having a support system in
Having a
place.
support system in place is pivotal and crucial to other people's success.
And that's across the board, autism or not.
Amen. Amen.
Rocking.
Well, thank you, Josh. I always love talking with you, and I feel like I always just learn so much from your knowledge on history, to learning just more about you as a person. But thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for being open.
Thank you for having me on this podcast. I'd love to do a take two or part two, part three sometime.
Well, I
Hell
think the
yeah.
next time we do like a part 2 or part 3, we can talk more about what your actual interests are, like history and World War II, and get political about it. Because I love I love having those conversations because I'm a nerd about that shit.
Mm-hmm.
So we can nerd out next time
We
about
can
World War
nerd and
II.
geek out next time about current events and the election, what's going on, but we're not going to do that today. Today was generally getting to know me and talking to the audience about what autism is, how to overcome autism, and just how to treat autistic people with respect and dignity.
Hell yeah.
I
Cool,
love
man.
it.
All right, well, let's go hang out and wrap this bad boy up. Thank you.
Wrap it up. Thank you for having me.